This strange gloom keeps getting thicker.
The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom. For most of my life, I've been a fan of Nintendo ever since I was a little kid, and I do love Mario, Kirby, Donkey Kong, all of the normal things you think of when you think of Nintendo. But none of them seem to stand out quite as much as the Legend of Zelda series. This is my favorite game series. And with the release of Tears of the Kingdom, Nintendo has come full circle and given us a unique experience that I personally believe topped all older entries in the series. So let me tell you why I think Tears of the Kingdom is a perfect game. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment, subscribe, and check that bell for more notifications in the future. Thank you for watching. Let's get into it. The game begins with you excavating an underground passage underneath Hyrule Castle with Princess Zelda. This is a scene that you walk through and you play through. You start the game with all of your hearts from Breath of the Wild and all your stamina too. Y'all make a discovery at the bottom, a mummified body being held down by a mystical hand. When you approach it, the arm loses its power to hold the mummy down, and the mummy resurrects itself. You are then stripped of all of the powers you have gained from Breath of the Wild. This is obviously the mummified version of Ganondorf, the human form of Calamity Ganon. After this, Zelda disappears and you are teleported to a sky island where you are able to heal. When you wake up, you are presented with this massive island in the sky, which serves as your tutorial to the rest of the game. While here, you will learn 4 new abilities. You will learn how to fuse items to your weapon, making them stronger. Also able to break fused materials to the weapons so that you can fuse more stronger or more durable material to it. The next one is recall. Recall allows you to rewind time on an object of your choosing. This is useful for getting up real high using falling objects. Ascend allows you to go through the ceiling of an area and basically swim your way to the top of it, such as mountains, buildings, etc. And finally, the one you're probably going to use the most, the Ultra Hand, which allows you to build vehicles that can be used to traverse the world, or to make bridges and solve little puzzles across the world. Doing this all while still not having the paraglider. Open the door to the Temple of Time in the sky and make your way to the edge where you give off the shattered Master Sword to Princess Zelda, who takes it deep into the past to be repaired. After this, you make one final jump off of the Sky Island, landing in a lake at the bottom on Hyrule Field. Now that we got that out of the way, I don't want to spoil too much, so this will be a spoiler-free review. Outside of maybe some mechanics that you may or may not want spoiled. If you don't mind mechanics, such as how the game plays, being spoiled, stay on for the ride. I'm going to comment on the game's visuals. Visually, the game looks identical to Breath of the Wild. However, there is so much more going on in it. The world has been developed and changed in many, many ways to where it doesn't even feel like the same Hyrule from Breath of the Wild, although it very much is. There are new chasms that can be jumped into to reach the depths underneath Hyrule, and the landmass total is more than twice the landmass of Breath of the Wild. To counteract such a large world, there is a lot more that can be done. Light roots that can be found in the depths to light up the darkness. Shrines and Korok seeds found all over the place in the Sky Islands and on Hyrule. And all the while, visually, we have beautiful cloud work that helps obviously obstruct some draw distances. I played a pre-patched version of the game and it ran very rough, but seeing footage of the game running with the post-patch shows me that I can have faith in the game's performance. Even with the stuttering and frame drops, it was not enough to deter me from playing through the game and enjoying it at the same time. Although it was a little annoying at times, especially in big boss fights. Breath of the Wild is noted for having a very muted soundtrack. It was not very bombastic. There was a lot of quiet tones, dealt a lot with nature. Tears of the Kingdom rectifies all of this. It still has that kind of nature, subtle tone to it at many parts. However, whenever you enter things like villages, dungeons, etc., there is music playing that puts you in mind of older Zelda titles. So I won't say it's bombastic or upbeat, but it is a lot more enjoyable than the score in Breath of the Wild. The main theme alone is phenomenal. Sound design in this game is beautiful, and I don't think anyone will be complaining about the music in this game. Let's talk about the difficulty. So this game has a lot more shrines than Breath of the Wild had, and as a result, you end up with a much higher heart count. I got 20 across, and seeing that that's when the next row starts on the 21st heart, meaning I think there's 40 hearts in this game, which is a 10 heart increase from Breath of the Wild. As a part of this, the game is much more difficult. The enemies that are around when you begin the game are much harder than the enemies that you face in Breath of the Wild. I have not played the Master Mode version of Breath of the Wild, but I can tell you based on the base game, Tears of the Kingdom is much more difficult than Breath of the Wild at its base. However, there are much more upgrades, and upgrading will make the game much more tolerable and even match the difficulty of Breath of the Wild, in my opinion. If you're running around with 40 hearts and then you upgrade your equipment, you're going to be fine for this adventure. Here goes the big one. There are shrines, Koroks, Fusing, Ascend, Ultra Hand, Recall. The game is very, very cryptic as well. There are light roots that can be found. There are musicians that can be found. And your armor upgrades are actually locked behind finding these musicians, which probably made the game more difficult for me than it needed to be, because I could not for the life of me figure out how to get the Great Fairies opened. This is what happens when you have the game early and you have zero guides on the internet on what to do. So I had to figure it out on my own. I figured it out right after I beat Ganondorf. The game's clues are kinda bullshit, but with that said, the game is still a wonderful adventure, and you can still figure things out if you take enough time. But the clues that they give you can sometimes be complete and utter nonsense. There's one part in particular where they give you a clue and it makes you think of one place, but really you need to go to a completely different place. The game has bright gloom seeds that can be used to light the way in dark passages, either in caves or in the depths. Be sure to pick up everything. Materials are much more scarce than they were in Breath of the Wild, meaning you're going to have a harder time coming up with money and a harder time getting critical ingredients to make certain types of food that you must have to basically beat the game. Do not hold off on buff elixirs and buff food. Always have attack up, defense up, things like that in your inventory. Also remember that the effect of the last item is the effect that stays in place. If you were to eat an attack up and then eat a sneak up, the sneak would be the one that you would have. Also works with the timer. The timer does not stack with buffs, so one at a time. What I like to do is to have a bunch of different meals that can heal me without giving a status effect, so that way if I use an item for a status effect, I can then heal myself without worrying about that status effect being replaced. There are dragons all over the game. Landing on and striking the dragon's head will give you a scale. These scales are incredibly powerful when fused onto equipment. And one of the things that kind of blew my mind is the variety of enemies in this game. There are a lot of callbacks, likes. Many of the bosses that you fight resemble boss fights from the past, with new ways to defeat them using your abilities and your weaponry. And while some of these boss fights are not actually that difficult, they are massive in size and much more interesting than the boss fights we had in Breath of the Wild, which were essentially the same boss fight with different movesets. The dungeon design in this game, and yes, there are dungeons in this game, I know there's a lot of conflicting reports out there from leakers, but there are actual dungeons in this game. There are temples. The temple design is very similar to the Divine Beast in a way, but the temples are designed and laid out much more interesting and take more time to figure out than I think the Divine Beasts do. My favorite temple was the Fire Temple. At the end of every temple is a boss fight. These boss fights are huge, massive, and gratifying. I really cannot say any more without spoiling things, but that should be enough information to know if you're going to enjoy it or not. Look, I'm giving this game a 10 out of 10. This is the Zelda game I dreamed of as a kid. All of the issues I had with Breath of the Wild have been solved mostly. I'm sorry for those of you who hate weapon breaking. It's in the game. Fusing does not completely alleviate it, but it does make your weapons last longer. But to me, this is a 10 out of 10. This is the perfect Zelda game. And I don't honestly know how they're going to build upon this for the next game. This game feels like Zelda in a way that Breath of the Wild never did. And I recommend you play this game for yourself. The Legend of Zelda: Tears of the Kingdom is now my favorite game of all time, surpassing A Link to the Past. I want to thank everyone who watched this video for watching. Remember to like, subscribe, comment, check that bell, all that good shit. And tell me how you enjoyed the game and tell me how your weekend's going. Shit, tell me a knock knock joke. Anyway, until we meet again, stay nerdy.